Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, where I get to talk with Kelly Rakowski out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She's CEO in the healthcare workforce management industry, leading a small growing company. And Kelly and I talk about a whole bunch of things, and you're going to love this conversation. She shares really deep insights, and I think she's a people genius. So very interesting to talk to her about how she developed her skills and really understanding deeply kind of how people work and what she needed to learn about herself to develop and sustain high performing teams. So please enjoy the episode. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, where I get to talk to real C-suite badass bosses about the real complicated things life throws at them and what they've learned as they've overcome these challenges. And I'm really excited to have Kelly Rakowski here. Kelly, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Meg. Thanks for having me.
I know you'll have a lot of fun stuff to share. So, Kelly is the CEO of a workforce management agency called American Health Staffing, and you're in Frisco, Texas, outside of Dallas.
Correct.
Yes. So, Kelly, you've had a long career in senior leadership roles, I'm sure, in a lot of diverse settings, a lot of interesting things that have come up. But first, help us get oriented. How did you land where you are now? And tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, over 30 years of professional life. And I started my whole career, Meg, has been spent in healthcare, in B2B companies serving healthcare organizations who are doing the important work of delivering care. And I've always found ways to enable them to be more effective, create more access to care, higher quality care, more cost-effective care that we all need at different points in our life. So healthcare has always been the passion from the start. I started there right after college, and I have a degree in healthcare administration. But early in my career, I found myself in consulting, doing management consulting and working with health systems on strategy and performance improvement, and eventually technology enablement and different business models. So first 15 or so years of my career gave me that foundation, which I'm sure I'll refer to in some of our discussions because it's been it was a great start and accelerated learning and so many great things about it. But then it also informed a lot of things in my leadership path.
Mhm.
I kind of made a pivot from working in consulting to actually leading businesses at some point, but all still kind of in the same realm, sometimes in leading consulting firms, some business process outsourcing companies, some technology-based companies, and then ended up in the world of workforce management and solutions for healthcare, which is a very large industry serving hospitals and physician groups and health systems. And you may not have heard this, but many people do know that we have a shortage of healthcare workers in the country. It's a very dynamic field. Healthcare is cyclical and seasonal, and so the ability to flex up and down your workforce at different times of year is important. And so an industry has really formed to help supplement and augment healthcare providers meeting the needs of their community. So we provide solutions that help bring nurses and doctors and technicians and other allied personnel to locations when they have gaps in needs. This company that I'm working with now has a technology solution. So it's not just about bringing the talent, it's about how do you get access to them? How do you work really efficiently with there's multiple suppliers out there, if you will, who do this. And so we really partner. That's where the solutions part comes in, is partner with them to do it in an efficient, effective way. And I will say I've been in this industry for about 7 years, but it feels like a lifetime because COVID in the middle of that had a huge upheaval to this whole market. So it's been a fascinating 7 years. And there's a lot of lingering impacts that COVID had in the healthcare space. And So that's been really an honor, I would say, humbling to serve at this time and continues to be so.
That is a very dynamic environment that you're in right now, and
Absolutely.
probably stressful for a lot of people. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about like when you're leading a team in high stress or high change environments, or just some of the friction and drama that can come up. Can you give us an example of a really difficult thing that you have had to overcome when it comes to the people side of the
Mm,
business? So the
hmm
just a culture, disengagement, bad bosses, some sort of complex people dynamic, right? So can you give us an example of that? What's a really tough one, and how
Yeah.
did you overcome it? What did you learn from it?
Yeah. Well, there's been many, right? On anyone who's been in a leadership role long enough knows that's where, mo most of your challenges come from. I would say, since I mentioned COVID, that was a very trying time for our company at the time. I was a different company, a large company. And there was multiple dynamics happening, Meg. So while we had really high demand for a certain set of our services, and we had to scale very quickly. Like all of us, we had to move to remote locations at a time when we were, when folks had downtime, our industry was off the charts in terms of volume and needs. But there were also parts of our company that our volumes stopped. We closed down part of healthcare. People stopped buying certain services. And so we had this incredible dynamic inside the company of needing to pivot to meet a need, but this mismatch of
Yeah.
talent and resources. And on the one hand, we had to lay off some people or furlough people. And on the other hand, we're hiring up or finding ways to do things and reskilling and retraining. And, through that, um, incredible stress and intention to do that. So when we kind of actually it was probably easier in the moment because people were rallied around a goal. You'd wake up in the morning and go, I've got to get 100 nurses to New York City. And everybody was rallied around this singular goal to go and do that. That's very motivating. It's hard to sustain over time. It was really more of the aftermath of that became really challenging and people questioning, what's our core business? What's my role? And we had the burnout. We had people leaving. I had a few companies that we had acquired prior to COVID that went through their natural changes, but never really got fully integrated into the organization. So the biggest challenge, and we did a corporate reorganization 2 weeks before COVID started. And I was in a new role where I was bringing together different divisions. So I had a whole new team. So I think it was about 18 months in when we started having the Great Recession. And for me, it was started at the top. And there were people who were making the decision to change. They were highly sought after. Our company was a target for talent, and people started taking those phone calls and getting the offers. And for me personally, I pride myself on building high performing teams for engaging and inspiring talent. And to me, it starts with leaders. And when people leave me, it's a real challenge. And so I'm dealing with the personal loss of that and what that meant, and also an organization now that was rapidly losing the people that they trusted and not sure where to go. So,
Mhm.
thankfully, I had a strong HR partner. I can't stress enough how important having a strong business partner from an HR and people perspective has been
Yeah.
in my career. And boy, did I need it then. And I wish I could say I had all the recipe for how to deal with that. But if I look back, some of the things that were really important is keeping people focused on our mission, keeping people focused on the strengths of what we still had, um, remembering that we're stronger than one person.
Mhm.
And it also created opportunities for new people to step up,
Mhm.
created opportunities to bring in fresh perspective. And so you almost have to take, if I took them all in, and it was sometimes could have been overwhelming, but we took each situation one by one. And I really relied heavily on the people who chose to stay, who wanted to stay, who stepped into roles maybe that they didn't have the opportunity. So starting to see the bright side, if you will, of injecting new talent and working through that change. But I always fall back on sort of mission purpose and how does, in some of those darkest times, how do they actually create opportunities to keep people motivated and keep the fear level, fear and uncertainty are the things that I think
Yeah.
team members, when they have those, they just become paralyzing.
Mhm.
So communicating and helping to make sure, reassure people that we are going to be okay.
Yeah. There's actually research on high performance leaders that they have positive beliefs. They have positive beliefs about situations and are able to come to the table and say, you know what, this is actually an opportunity for us. I believe in us. The problem is you've got to manage your own reaction, like you said, before you can show up for other people that way. And it's a lot of pressure.
It is. It is. And I think having, you know, you gotta, you can't just squelch that narrative in your head. You got to deal with it. But
Yep.
where you deal with it and how you deal with it
Yep.
has to be in a safe place. And people, when you show up, people need you to show up with that sort of strength and positivity because they follow you and they
Right.
read your cues. They're
Yep.
smart.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, I always felt like I'm flying a plane when there's a crisis moment, and you don't want the
Mhm.
pilot of the plane to look back at everyone and go, I'm scared. Are we doing okay? Like in a crisis situation, you need to be the pilot that says, I've got this.
That's
I'm
right.
flying it in the right direction. You're all with me. But you can't show up and go, oh my God, we're falling apart, even if that's what's going on in your head.
Yeah.
Right? And the human brain, we know it's like your amygdala, that lizard brain's going to be firing. And you
That's
have to
right.
have an immense amount of skill in calming that down.
That's
Um,
right.
and not everyone has that skill, right?
Yeah.
And we tend to undervalue it as well.
Hmm.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about culture. I know that you focus on that. You care about
Hmm.
that. But let's talk about like really culture. Culture is just
Hmm.
like a set of attitudes, beliefs, and the way that we're interacting. These little
Yep.
micro interactions, right? And how those collectively describe how a team is functioning. And there's a lot of cultural issues out there in companies. No one's got the perfect culture, right? And culture can evolve without you. If you're not shaping it proactively, then it's going to be shaped by the alphas, the big personalities, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you've probably had a lot of big personalities that you've worked with. So, can you give me an example of kind of a unique cultural dynamic or issue that you've had to face?
Hmm.
And to truly try and get a team high performing, but there was a thing about the way they were showing up that wasn't working. Do you have an
Yeah.
example of that, and how did you fix it?
Yeah, and I think the way you describe culture is spot on. And I used to think culture was this big thing that was just organic and it happened. And I think as I've grown and experienced and been in position to actually influence culture, I've realized that you can shape a culture and you need to be deliberate about how you shape that culture. And, in big companies, I worked for GE, for example. They had a culture that started in, a century ago, and that was pretty embedded, right? And a lot of what you had to do was figure out how your microculture fit into the big culture.
Yep.
Um, and a small company where I am today, that's at an earlier stage,
Mhm.
we're making this shift from more of that startup mentality, that scrappiness,
Mhm.
to how do you scale? And I've seen a lot of companies as they make that change into a more scaled organization. If you don't deal with culture, it does, people are confused. They
Mhm.
don't know what the reward system's based on. They don't understand these new behaviors. And I've seen, myself included, when you have people from big companies who come into smaller companies and they just expect people to follow. It's like, no, you need to spend the time to redefine it. So I'll say right now, I'm in that situation. And it was interesting when I first walked into the company and went to now the first office, the word grit showed up everywhere. I mean, it was on posters, it was on everybody's desk. So grit had became this really, in a positive way for the company, this really important ethos around how we get stuff done, right? But it's that startup mentality, that
Yeah.
early stage
Yeah.
mentality of like, we just got to go and get it done. Well, my, marching orders to come in were like, how do we scale this business? And grit to me meant, man, we're relying on individuals.
Yeah.
And we need to put in the systems and structures to help people become, be more successful and to grow. And so I actually did an employee sensing session. I spent all summer meeting with our employees across the company, either virtually in person, and I asked specifically, what does the word grit mean to you, and how do you feel about that word? And we also then we've taken employee input to say what are your values and what do you think this company can represent? So we wanted values to be very sort of bottoms up driven.
Hmm.
And then the leadership team now is doing the work against, do these fit with our strategy? Are these the values that we need? So we'll do a little bit of, iteration of those. But back to grit as the example, 9 out of 10 team members told me we don't like that word. That
Okay.
means I have to work really hard. That means it's going to take me, pushing through something to make it happen. And I asked them what's a better word, and the word perseverance came up a lot. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't just about replacing it or dishonoring its role. It's more about how do we also reframe it to
Hmm.
be about how we work together. And in the end, you still need perseverance, but that felt like a more positive word to the team. So, there's an example of shifting that mindset and helping the team understand that and hear from us, the leadership team consistently. It's about collaboration. It's about fixing problems. It's about stabilizing or strengthening the foundation of what we do so that you as a team member can do the important work of serving in whatever function you're doing
Right.
and not let all this other stuff that you had to grit your way through be a distraction
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, those nuances are super important as you're evolving as a company
Hmm.
because they really do change people's behaviors because it's your belief and your mindset is what's going to drive your behavior. And if you tell a group of people just grit it out, take the
Yeah.
hits,
Yeah.
like no, no one wants to do that. But and that
Hmm.
was appropriate potentially for startup when everything's exciting and small.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's also I've heard of companies when they're reframing and reshaping their culture, people say, oh, it's getting too corporate. That's an
Hmm.
important distinction too. So
Hmm.
we're not going corporate, right? We're getting more
Hmm.
sophisticated about what we're doing so that, like you said, you can focus on what you need to do and have predictable systems and structures to do that. And
That's
that's
right.
sophistication. It's not corporate.
That's right. And I always try to tie it back to the individual. So back to my employee sensing sessions, a lot of people say, because I'm coming across situations and I'm turning to my people leader and saying, well, do we have a policy for that? Well, we
Uh-huh.
don't, right? So there's a lot of just kind of understood practices that come
Right.
into play. And as you grow and you have different divisions, and then there's fairness, and then there's protection and risk. But so we can look at all those things from a corporate perspective and say, oh, this is better if we have a policy in place. That's not really exciting to a team member. So what I heard from my team members was, I don't know how to get stuff done. I don't know where to go to find how to execute on this process. I don't know how to go and, look for my benefits, like whatever those things are that are the nuisances that get in their way. And so
Yeah.
what they said to me was, boy, I could really use more of that because that's going to
Okay.
make my life easier. So now we reframe when we roll out things like that to say, this is how this is going to help you. This isn't about us, saving more money or becoming more corporate, but standards are
Yeah.
actually give you clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it. So, you have had to be a part of all these difficult situations. It sounds like you handled these really well, but there's maybe earlier in our career where we hit these complex friction points where we don't handle it super awesome, right?
Hmm.
And also, like, we often see other leaders showing up in ways that are very not helpful, and we learn how we
Hmm.
want to be as a leader based on their mistakes and
Hmm.
combined with our mistakes. So, can you give me an example of where you have tripped up and realized
Hmm.
that wasn't the right approach in
Hmm.
leadership, or you've watched someone else and thought, ooh, definitely don't want to do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the second part of the question is easier to answer, Meg. So I will.
See, I'm letting you off the hook there, Kelly. You can go the easy
I
way.
like it. I like it. I appreciate that approach. Yeah, I was. It's causing me to reflect on the leaders who pop up, right? And there's the good ones, right? The ones who those early, I think about some of the early influences I had in my career that shaped me. My first leader was really espoused visibility and management by walking around and connecting with people. I had some who were just really great at navigating work-life balance and helping me in different stages of, becoming a mother and trying to adjust to that. And this notion of when how you value people when you've given so much, like the company needs to give back to you, and how you create those win-wins. And I'm really tied to kind of servant leadership, right? Leaders are there to get the most out of our teams and help them develop. So when I think about the examples of where I didn't see that happening, those are the ones that stick out for me. I had an early leader in my consulting days. I remember one of the first assignments I had. I was working with him. I had never like been away from home, at night, or and he was used to that. He's been in this business for 30 years, and it was like, we're working on a proposal, and he said, "Well, you can just get a hotel room tonight." And I was like, "What? Like, what does that mean? I'm calling my mom. Like, how do I do this?" And so, not seeing and understanding, what the employees' needs are. Now, as I, progressed in my career, that's a small example, but those are the ones that stick out for me, Meg, where leaders believe that people need to conform to their
Mhm.
style and their needs without an appreciation for what that employee is going through or how they work best. And I've had a few instances with leaders, and this, I didn't mean this to, but a couple of them, pertain more to managing female employees. And I had a leader who was leading a large project in consulting, and people were working for, a year in one place, and he was the managing partner, and he would come in on Wednesday nights, and all of the senior leaders on the team were expected to come and meet with him in the bar at 9 o'clock at night and spend 2 hours, having drinks, talking about what happened in the day, getting, they were doing business, but it was in this environment. And I had a couple of the female leaders on the team come to me and say, "This isn't healthy for me. I don't like to drink. I don't like that environment. But if I don't, and I'm trying to be healthy, I'm away from home. But if I don't show up, I don't get
Oh,
access to this leader. I don't get to be a part. I don't get the fun assignments that come up." And so I had to intervene, and it was really challenging to get the leader to really see and understand. And his perspective was, hey, I have to go to where my leader is. People have to come to me, and that's what you have to do to grow in your
mm,
career. And so some of that old school thinking, when
yeah.
that showed up, was very, very problematic. And so fortunately, he was a bit good natured. I think like after like hours of conversation, finally got to him. But that was tough. And so,
Uh,
and that really just taught me, especially in a time where we think about inclusion and compassion, and because those two individuals that he was leaving out, he was stunting their growth. They were becoming very disengaged. They were starting to question if this is something that they were going to do. And I saw them as, vital to what we had to do. So that situation really opened my eyes.
yeah, that's a whole paradigm shift, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't, I can't blame him. Frankly, a lot of the people who've led me have been
Hmm.
very hierarchical, that kind of demand and control style of leadership. And I felt myself slide into that sometimes because that's
Sure.
what we knew. That's what we were taught. Like, I've got all
Hmm.
the answers. And then you end up just kind of looking like a jerk, and people feel like, well, I guess Meg's just going to solve it all. She has all the answers, and I guess we'll
Hmm.
just keep having to do things her way. And then they stop caring. They just
That's
let
right.
go. They don't really own their work anymore. And
That's
then we
right.
all in leadership roles go, why don't they care?
Yeah.
Well, you're controlling them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
people don't want that.
That's right. That's right. And you don't get the best from people. You know, we all know that. We've learned that. And you don't inform your thinking at all.
Yeah,
And I approach everything with humility, and I don't always have the right answers. And there's time where you come in and you have to have that command and control. People need, they're floundering. You've
there are.
got to give direction and you've got to give clarity. And it's also about knowing when do you leave that room, for people to contribute in different ways.
Yeah,
And so that situational leadership, I think, is so important.
yeah, yeah. And that command and control style is great when there's an emergency, a safety issue. It's like 5%
Hmm.
of the time. The problem is we like to use it 80% of the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like to say we're not saving lives. People out there are doing it, but it's not life or death, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So, I have to admit, I'm not letting you off the hook because I'm
yeah.
intrigued in hearing what has been a hard lesson for you in leadership,
Hmm.
like we're talking about, where you
Yeah.
realize, oh, I was my own worst enemy in that situation, or, I really had to change my paradigm and shift out of an old way of showing up or being, or even just an old personality trait you had to manage better,
Hmm.
or old mindset.
Hmm.
Can you give us an example of that? What was that hard learning moment? What did you take away?
Yeah. I'll reflect back on something I said earlier about, fundamentally, I think my job is to get everybody inspired and get people. I have a little bit of that. I need people to like me, right? That's always been one of my personality traits, and sometimes that has caused me to hang on too long.
Oh yeah.
And when I reflect on decisions I've made or, things that have happened to me, and I know I'm not alone because I've had this conversation with others. It's you have to make those tough decisions when you have a leader or an employee who's not the right fit.
Hmm.
And it's especially hard when somebody's had made great contributions. They they have value, and it's that culture fit, that behavior fit
Yeah.
usually is the issue. I
Yeah.
mean, if they're not performing, it's usually pretty easy. It's those gray areas, right? And you
Yeah.
say, okay, am I going to put up with this behavior at the risk of, alienating 10 other people, right? And sometimes it's because they've got the relationship with a client or they've been able to drive growth or whatever those things are. And so when I reflect back, it's always, well, I should have done that 6 months ago. And it's not only for myself, it's also for usually that individual is in the wrong place, right? So there's usually some of those dynamics going on. So I think that's where, when I reflect back on things I would have done differently or could have done differently in the moment, it was having more courage to make those changes, because after the fact, you always find that I've always discovered it was the right decision.
Yeah.
And people tell you, wow, I wish you had done that a while ago. Now,
Exactly. Yeah.
so, and I don't mean to be callous about that, but I think somewhat of my needing to win everybody over and make it work is
Yeah.
more of a driver. And sometimes it's just the courage to do that, and know the work that comes with making a change,
Yeah.
and
And you don't
making
want to do that. You don't
you
want to face
don't.
that. Yeah.
It's, sometimes, and sometimes you do make those choices. Like, is this the right time right now for the organization? But those are the things I think that's where also when it's really good to have people you can go to
Hmm.
and say, check me on my thinking here,
Hmm.
and do the discovery work and get over that for yourself, knowing
Hmm.
that there's something better on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. I can honestly say I messed this up a lot. I
Hmm.
fired too slowly,
Hmm.
and most leaders I've worked with have fired too slowly. Like we've all
Yeah.
made this mistake. And I'll double down and be extra honest that part of my resistance to firing was that I would have to admit that I did a mishire. Like this
Yeah.
wasn't a good decision. I brought them into a role that they couldn't do, and
Yes.
I should have hired slower. I should have been more careful about that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be too optimistic about, oh, everyone will just figure it out. No, some people are not
Hmm.
going to be a fit. And
Yeah.
when the challenges of that job are not in alignment, for them as a person, then you have the cultural and behavioral issues. And
That's
I
right.
had to look at myself and say, that's on you, Meg. And
Hmm.
I didn't, part of me didn't want to admit that. And I held on
Yeah.
to people thinking, I didn't make a bad decision here.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep. I
that's
think that's fair, and that's hard to admit.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
And I've definitely, us type A personalities, which frankly, most people who end up in a C-suite role have very type A tendencies.
Yep.
And all of us are so achievement driven
That's
that
right.
it's really hard to admit you totally screwed this up.
Yep.
You are the barrier, right?
Yep. And what's worse is you got to learn what you learn is it's worse to hang on to that. And
Mhm.
it's better to discover that, move on, and then make up for it. And how does that influence the way you hire the next person? And but yeah.
Yeah, and to me, like you said, you realize after you let them go and after the
Hmm.
separation happens, everyone comes forward and is like, why didn't you do that sooner?
Yeah.
And I just had to have that happen once, and I was like,
Hmm.
that's it.
Yeah.
I'm hurting other people by holding on to this.
And that is my North Star. And I have a fantastic partner in HR, and she reminds me of that all the time. Like if you hold on to those people, you're affecting all the top talent in the organization, and they're watching and they're
They are,
watching.
and they're
Yeah,
judging you for it.
absolutely. And they are way more important, usually in the
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, yeah. Love it. So, um, you've obviously done a lot of reflection and personal growth.
Hmm.
And some people would say, Kelly, you're at the pinnacle of your career. You've had all these experiences, and now you're in the CEO role in an environment you wanted to be in with all this experience. But knowing you, I think you're still pushing yourself to challenge, grow personally. So what is that next area of growth so that you can continue to just be even more fulfilled by your work, have the kind of influence you want to have? What does this next chapter look like for you?
Yeah, you're being too kind for me, Meg, because there's so many things. And just for clarification, I just hit my 1 year mark, so I've been in the CEO seat for a year, and this is my first CEO role. And
Yeah,
it's been such a year of learning, of growing, and I have so much to learn. And they do say, I think you even said this to me, it's lonely at the top, right? I think I am discovering that's true. However, I work really hard to surround myself with people who call me on it. We're doing a lot of leadership development in the company and investing in our leaders, and I'm right there with them. And I try so hard to be, you know, to role model vulnerability and investment in myself because I want others to do that as well. But it's really authentic because I have a lot of things that I need to continue to learn. Now, having said that, I have a lot more confidence than I did at one time. For me, just from I'm in a company that is PE backed. I've worked primarily for large Fortune 500 companies or for-profit companies, and so this is a new experience for me, taking a company at this stage, helping it scale, and then positioning it for that next evolution, no matter what that is. So that's a whole new area for me to come. I've always been a growth leader, and this is a growth company, but to have growth with a very specific outcome associated with it. So that's an area I'm focused on. Talking to other CEOs who've been in this situation, using my sponsors as partners, but also seeking out some third party groups. In fact, Vistage is a group that I've recently been introduced to, and
good.
starting a local CEO group here because I think that's while I have a lot of leaders around me who uh, who I can be vulnerable with and where we're learning together, you do have to have those outside folks. So for me, it's probably a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of the financials and how we position a company, but it's also the relationship building out in the market
Mm,
and positioning us and making sure that we have a strategy that ties to our operations, that
yep,
ties to our capital deployment. That's a
yep,
huge area. Are we deploying capital in the right places
yeah.
that are actually going to drive to the results that we need? And getting all of those mechanisms like aligned and humming in
Hmm.
a way that the organization's following through on what we said as our strategy that frees me up And that's probably the biggest thing is I just think about after a year of putting the right leadership team in place, getting plans in place to scale the company, putting people in place who can go and do that so I can do my job of being very externally focused.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole new level of responsibility and pressure when it's really just your butt on the line for everything, right? There's
Yes.
no more big corporation.
Yeah, I can't
You
blame
create.
anybody.
That's what I always said. I can't
Yeah,
blame anyone.
that's
Like,
right.
if this place goes down, that's on me. And that's
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 right.
a different kind of pressure.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've discovered this year is the need to balance multiple constituencies
Mm-hmm.
and how do you navigate making your investors happy? It's pretty
Yep.
clear what they're looking for. I have a board who has different views and opinions and goals. And then you have like where I get my energy from is the 250 people who wake up every morning who are depending on this company to grow and they've got to take care of themselves and their families. And that's what drives me. And I feel like I owe them that
Yep.
path. And that's real and tangible for me. But
Mhm.
sometimes that is a little bit at odds with maybe decisions our investors would make. So
Absolutely. It should be at
trying to
odds.
satisfy without sub-optimizing everything
Yep.
is, I think, one of the biggest dances that we need to do.
Yeah. Actually, Joel Trammell here in Austin, he wrote a
Hmm.
book and he talks about the triangle of tension. And that's what you
Hmm.
are talking about here is there's when you're decision making and you're a CEO, you're at the center of a triangle of tension. There's the needs and interests of employees versus customers versus shareholders.
Hmm.
And every decision you make is going to piss off potentially any one, two, or three of them, and you're pulled in these different directions. And that's why I love the
Mm.
triangle of tension metaphor,
Yeah,
that you should be very aware that that is what you're doing. And you can't just default to shareholders or employees or customers or clients,
that's
right?
right. You need them all.
And that's a very delicate tension to navigate.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Kelly, we were talking earlier about all the stuff we wish we would have known and had access to when we were
Hmm.
young leaders. So,
Hmm.
if I could give you a time machine and send you
Hmm.
back in time 15 years or so, what advice would you give the younger leader, Kelly?
Mm. Love these questions. Why is it as we get older, Meg, everybody wants to know like what would you go back and tell your younger self? And my initial reaction to those questions are, you can't like if I change something, where would that leave me today, right? So much of our inclination is how do I tell myself something, really smart that would help them avoid a situation or do better in something. And then you say, well, if I didn't go through that,
Yep.
I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today, which is probably the crux then of my advice would be around trusting myself more.
Hmm.
I think, and especially as young leaders, and I was very fortunate to have a lot of sponsorship and do well early in my career and find myself in leadership positions as a young leader. And I think to some extent I didn't know I had earned the right to be there.
Hmm.
And I would wait and voice my opinion later. I would read the room. I would get a sense of what others are thinking and then chime in. And I had a great boss at Accenture once tell me, because we did a lot of it was a highly matrix organization. So there was a lot of decision making that happened as a group. And and a lot of men too, I will say that, Meg, but whether or not that influenced or not, we'll leave for another podcast. But he said to me once, he said, Kelly, I value your leadership. People follow you. You're doing a great job. He said, but I don't hear your voice enough.
Hmm.
And we want to hear from you, and we're not hearing from you.
There you go.
And it forced me to go outside of my bounds
Mhm.
and say, I have a greater purpose of contributing in other ways that I'm not. And to be called out on that, I was like, woo. But he also helped me because he gave me some confidence that said, and he was authentic, like, we do want to hear from you. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll start offering opinions more. So I think, and so that's one example, but I think
Mhm.
trusting myself and having more confidence and being willing put myself out there more. And I
Hmm.
think that probably slowed me down at some points. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, that's what I go back and say to myself 15 years ago is, people, you have good ideas. You are capable. You have earned this. Go get it.
Yeah. And if these people see it, even if I
Yeah,
don't totally believe it, I should trust them because
that's
they know
right.
what they're doing. They have visibility into what it takes to do this job and they think I can do it. Right.
That's right. Right. That
Um,
imposter syndrome is real, right? And it never fully goes away, but I certainly know that, your confidence grows as you get through these situations, and having a little more confidence earlier would have served me well.
yeah. It's not that you wouldn't have made all the mistakes, it's that it wouldn't have been so stressful.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you again for coming on the podcast and having this really authentic conversation. You shared so many cool nuggets. So thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Meg. Thank you.